Gareth, Ackerman, thank you for your time. I'm the chairman of Pick n Pay Group. It's a fantastic office. I love the view. I must say, you're very privileged. And you're living in Cape Town, so I'm very jealous.
Lovely place.
Lovely place. Now, let's start at the beginning. I mean, you are, part of, and not like in your blood, not even just as a businessman, of an iconic group. But let me just take you back. What was your first job, even if it was a student job?
When my father bought Pick n Pay in 1967, I was, 10 years old? And I remember on Friday afternoons, he used to pick me up from school and I used to go around stores with him. There were only 4 little stores in those days. But and I used to work on the checkouts and I used to work on fruit and veg and I used to work around the stores. But the first proper job I had was, once again, in Pick n Pay when I was about 16. And I was working in our Plumstead store. And the fruit and veg manager resigned and walked out overnight. And the store manager said, well, you're it. So here I had to learn. And fortunately, there were good staff and supervisors, and they taught me how to be a manager and how to run the thing. But it was an amazing experience.
16? I
was 16.
Can you believe it? And now, just to see a company grow, like you said now, 4 stores to what it is today.
Yeah.
What do you think is the secret? What happened? Where was that magic that happened and this growth kicked in?
I think a key thing when you're looking at a business of Pick n Pay's nature is we've gone, as we said, from 4 stores to 1,400 stores over, and it's now, what will be 50 years next year. And there were a couple of S-curves, and when one looks at a business and one looks at business strategy as to how do you take yourself from where you are to where you want to go into the future. And I think in the early stages, my father started first have the few stores in Cape Town. First big jump was he went to PE, and then he had a big jump to Johannesburg, and that was the first S-curve. And then there was a lot of competition in the marketplace in those days between the Checkers and the OK Group and what have you. And there was a lot of threat to the business. So he then put onto a new S-curve and opened the first hypermarket, which was in 1975, 76 or thereabouts. And I remember working there on the opening day, and I was the expert fridge salesman. So I was selling fridges and freezers. I didn't even know how they worked, but I was still selling them. But anyway, it was an amazing experience. But that was picked me on the first S-curve. Yes. And then we stayed there for opening hypermarkets, kept opening our supermarkets, until probably the late 80s, early 90s, when we then moved on to a next S-curve, when we really started opening our franchise division. And that gave us a huge new spur of growth, and then now into Africa. And so we're constantly looking for putting on a new S-curve.
You are balanced between the straightforward business side, but also you oversee the foundations. And the balance between that must be an amazing privilege to realize you've grown a business that can do and make a difference in people's lives. How do you manage that?
Well, I don't directly look after the foundations. I look after the family as a whole. So the family, office, and investor, the running of the family, of which the foundations are one. Pick n Pay is our largest investment. We have a number of other investments. So I oversee all of that. But you've got to look at what the culture of Pick n Pay is. We have 3 core values around which we've built this business, and everything that works in Pick n Pay works around those 3 core values. The first one is the customer is queen. Look after the customer. Make sure that what we do is we give the best what we can to our customers in terms of stores, product offering, service, what have you. So we're not always perfect, but we try the best. But that's a core value. The second core value is doing good as good business. Doing good as good business. And doing good as good business means putting back into the community, being part of the community in which people operate, being part of the life of our customers. So we give the equivalent of about 6 or 7% of our after-tax profits as a company every year to causes. So it's everything from developing small businesses right the way through to straight looking after people who've got nothing and everything in between. So it's everything from supporting the cycle to breast cancer awareness to our schools clubs where we're actually supporting schools. It's all part of our giving back to society. And then the third value is the value of business efficiency because you cannot be good to your customers and look after the communities unless you're running a really efficient business and making profits. Because if a business doesn't make profit, it can't look after the other side of it. So we are unashamedly a profit maker, but we try and manage our profits to make sure that we are putting back into society as well. And therefore the family fits into that context as well. So we take, as a family, a fair portion of our dividend that we get every year from Pick n Pay, and we then allocate it within the family to the causes that we wanted to go to. And Pick n Pay has given us money for our foundation, and we have a Ackerman Pick n Pay Foundation, which is run by my sister Suzanne, who runs it for the Pick n Pay group, doing what Pick n Pay wants to do.
If an entrepreneur, and that's why we're doing this series, if he comes up to you at a conference and say, I just want one piece of advice, because you've overseen this and you've seen since childhood how this company has grown, what will your one piece of advice be to a new entrepreneur?
If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting and you have a small business, I think there is really only one thing, and that is absolute laser-sharp focus. You know, I think I have the luxury is that I inherited a business, in inverted commas, that was a big business, well-run, good management team. But if you look at my father and the way he started this business, he's absolutely laser-focused on where you want to go. So set your goals, know how you're going to get there, and just focus on achieving those goals all the time, because I think that has to be the only thing. Because if you do that, if you allow yourself to be muddled with all the other bits and pieces around you, it's too easy to start thinking you're successful too quickly. You know, one of the problems we often have with a lot of small business people is that they don't understand the difference between turnover and cash flow and profits. And they think if they've got a lot of turnover coming in that it's profits, when in fact it's cash flow. And so all of a sudden there's a lot of turnover, and they go out and first thing they're going to do is buy themselves a new BMW. And then when it comes to pay the bills, there's no money to pay the bills. So it's all around that. So that would be my second bit of advice, is to really focus on cash flow. Where's the cash coming from? Where's it going to go to? And have you got enough to run your business?
Why are you still positive about Africa, and especially South Africa?
We're very positive about South Africa. We're positive about Africa as a business. We're growing. We're in about 7 or 8 countries at the moment. We'll be opening in Nigeria and Ghana over the next year or so. And we feel there's a huge growth and huge opportunity in Africa. The population of Africa is going to grow from about 1.2 to 2.4 billion people over the next 30-odd years. And they're getting wealthier, so they can afford more. Therefore, there's a huge opportunity for consumer goods and for formalizing retail and for opportunities. The second issue is that, even though it doesn't look like it, I think governance in Africa is improving. I think you're seeing a decline in corruption. This openness and transparency that's happening across the continent is going to be good for business. And people are growing, and economies are growing, and consumers, because of their access to technology through smartphones, through the internet, through all of those issues, are demanding from their governments better access, better products. Because of the openness in communications, people today are able to confront their governments more effectively and are able to actually demand change. And so I think as a result, you're finding a lot more accountability of governments and accountability of the people in control. And so I think you're going to get improving governance over the next 10, 15 years, which I think will help Africa, which I think will help business, and our business in particular. The other thing is you walk around the cities of Africa. I was in Harare yesterday, and you see the impact of South African business and the positive impact that it's making in certain parts of the continent. I think there's a lot of negative towards South Africa because South African business tends to be, I think, fairly arrogant in the way it deals with business outside South Africa, and we need to look at that. And we need to make sure that it's a two-way street, that it's not only about us putting goods and services into those countries, but it's about creating exports from those countries and bringing them back into South Africa, and using the various networks like SADC and NEPAD Foundation, all these different organizations to help create that cross-border trade. And by so doing, you actually help grow the economies in those countries.
You look so busy. Just explain to us the different roles you're playing in the bigger group?
So I've got very involved in industry. So I co-chair the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, and I co-chair the International Consumer Goods Forum. And as an industry, we are probably one of the biggest employers in the world, and we're the biggest employer probably in South Africa as well. And we need to be involved in global issues. So at the International Consumer Goods Forum level, we look at areas such as sustainability, food safety, food security, social contracts around child labour, forced labour, those sort of issues, refrigeration, different environmental issues. And so we set a global agenda, and then we take that global agenda and I drive it into the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa. So we're now trying to set a standard within the South African, and we're now trying to move it up Africa as well, to set a standard, say what is best practice for what's good for the consumer, what's good for the industry, what's good for the planet, and make sure that we actually, as an industry, are creating positive outcomes for the planet as a whole. And then we encourage the companies that are members of those organizations to incorporate those principles into the way they operate as businesses. So I'm helping drive the global agenda through to the regional, then obviously down into a specific company thing. Because if we don't do that as an industry, I think you're going to see too much waste. You know, there's about 60% of all food produced in Africa doesn't hit the table. And globally, it's about 40 to 50% of food is wasted. And, you know, if we can cut food waste by half without increasing any more agricultural production, we can basically feed the world, just dealing with food waste. And it applies in a whole lot of different areas. By looking where palm oil comes from, you'll save the forests of Borneo, Malaysia, by looking for sustainable palm oil. If you watch soya, you're then saving forests in Brazil. And so everything that we deal with as an industry is interlinked. You know, beef, cattle produce more methane than the entire transport industry in the world. So I think all the planes, all the cars and everything, the cattle produce more methane, which has a big impact on global warming, which has a big impact on climate change, which has a big impact on everything that we do. So if we as an industry can start working at those very basic levels, and come back to food waste, the amount of methane that's produced by rotting food is huge and has a big impact on climate change. So it's all interlinked. And I think as business people, we need to make sure that we are taking responsibility for the impact we have on the planet, and at the same time being able to interface with government to make sure that laws and regulations that are put in place actually look after the macro agenda, not necessarily a narrow political agenda.
I think, if I understand it right as well, if you think of corporate responsibility, for years it was helping the poor, only that. And all of a sudden, you realize now it's helping the planet. Is so much more. You never forget about the people. But it's the planet. We can't lose water. We can't lose the planet. Absolutely. And that changes the whole perspective.
Yeah. That's absolutely. And it comes back to the pick and pay second value of doing good is good business. It's absolutely part of our DNA as a company to do all of those issues, and to then make sure that we get involved on a global basis as well, to make sure that we can add our bits to helping save the world.
Great. So thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.